Hey guys, welcome to Most Craved. I'm Jenna Bush with Legion of Leia.
I'm Silas Lesnick with ComingSoon.net.
And this week we are talking about franchises and why they're successful and why they bomb. In speaking of bombing, we had a little thing called Gem that left theaters after 2 weeks because it did so badly.
And it's a shame Bibbs isn't here to talk with us about it because he loves Gem so much.
I know.
I think that's one of those, it's a good example of how much people care about the property because that was something that was entirely built on a nostalgia-driven property that hasn't been adapted or, I mean, I guess there's a comic book series more recently.
Really good comic book series. But yeah, and I think part of it is if you're going to take something that most people of a certain age don't know about, but people my age are super fans of, and I've talked before about what a huge fan of Gem I am, and you're going to take everything that made it what it is, except for pink hair and being in a band, and completely change it, the people you were targeting don't care anymore. And, you know, it's sort of like, okay, so it's like some guy in the studio was like, okay, so I got this great idea for a Calvin and Hobbes movie, except that instead of being a kid, we're going to make him a really plucky teenager. And instead of having an imaginary stuffed animal that he thinks talks to him, it's going to be a talking house cat, but it's a tabby, so it'll be just like a tiger. Like, you're gonna piss off everybody that you want to bring in with that. By the way, the only reason I use that example is because I think he's got rules that like they can't make a Calvin Hobbes movie.
He's very against any merchandising or anything.
Yeah, so that's the only reason I said that, because I feel like if I said that out loud, someone would actually do it if they could. But you know, then you have something like, say, World of Warcraft, and like, you know what a huge World of Warcraft fan I am.
And I mean, this is probably an interesting discussion because I don't know anything about, I saw the trailer, I saw the footage at Comic-Con, but it hasn't hit me yet. And I love Duncan Jones. I'm excited for a new Duncan Jones movie, and I like the idea of Duncan Jones doing a big fantasy movie, but the trailer left me, I see that there's orcs and there's humans.
Well, I think this is a case of, it's like, I know what I saw. And I think that if you don't, the trailer's just like, oh, look, it's orcs and humans. But, you know, for me, like, I know what city I saw, I know what weapons I saw, I know the characters, I know why Garona is green, I know who she is, I know why she doesn't look like the other orcs. So, you know, for a huge fan like me, and I mean, I'm like, I walked around with a stuffed baby Murloc on my head at BlizzCon, so when I say I'm a big fan, like, I'm not a casual gamer. So, I get what I'm seeing. And I think that had they brought this film out back when Cataclysm happened, which was one of the big expansions, when Sam Raimi was up for this. And I know a lot about this because my boyfriend storyboarded this. That was when you had, I think it was, I could be wrong about this, but I think it was 12 million players, and now you have 5.5. So I think in this case, they are doing fan service the right way in that, yes, there are definitely changes, like Garona's character is not half human, she's half another race in the game, but they've taken lore that means something to people like me and said, yes, here. But I don't think there's really a way to make this palpable for people who, palatable, wow, I can't speak today. Not palpable, different. But for people who don't really play the game, because from what I've heard from most people, they're like, oh, it's like Lord of the Rings. And it's not. There are orcs, but no.
I don't know. I think that there's an interesting side of, sometimes you can trick people into feeling like they should be embarrassed that they don't know more about it. I think something, Avatar is a good example of that. Avatar's a movie that, I mean, it didn't have a fan base simply because it didn't exist before being a movie, but there was just sort of a boldness of them saying, this is the biggest movie of all time, you're going to see it. And everyone did.
Yep.
And the flip side of that would be something like probably John Carter, where you have a property where theoretically it's been around for 100 years, people should know who John Carter is, people should love the stories, but the sort of wishy-washy, like, are you going to see it? And trying to catch people up, I think actually hurt the film.
Oh, yeah. Well, John Carter, I mean, that's sort of like marketing lesson on what not to do, because John Carter, these books were, all sci-fi is based on these books. Like all filmmakers like Spielberg and Lucas, like a lot of them took a lot of stuff from this. So when you watch the film and you're like, oh, that's the Millennium Falcon. Oh, this is so derivative. You're like, no, those things are derivative of this. But if you're going to apologize for what you're making, not call it Of Mars, you're not going to talk about the reason you're making this film and explain why we know Mars is cold, but there's people on it, and say like you're making this epic fantasy based on this thing that influenced all of these major filmmakers. Like, I would have gone to see that. I did see John Carter, and I didn't dislike it. think, it's a character in ER. It just doesn't, and you can say that films with Mars in the title bomb, but I think it would have made a difference if it was in there.
I'm also kind of fascinated just in terms of Star Wars, because I think we're at a point in time where everyone is so excited for Star Wars that it's hard to remember that there was actually a point in time where people didn't care about Star Wars. Marvel Comics had a Star Wars series that continued to run after Return of the Jedi, and it was eventually canceled because people just didn't care by the late 80s. And it took a while for Star Wars to come back into the pop culture spotlight again. I think it's really interesting looking at Disney, which is a company that historically has been very good about setting up its properties to, they have the Disney Vault.
Yeah.
So an animated movie will go into the Disney Vault and it won't be available for 5 to 10 years. And it makes it exciting again. So I am curious to see how the box office from the 6 Star Wars movies that they have announced, it may be that even if they are successful, we eventually get a long break of Star Wars.
Yeah, and I think you can get fatigue from anything. I mean, I'm sorry, I'm wearing a Star Wars shirt, I love Star Wars, you know that, but there's definitely fatigue, and like, I've been saying for a long time how excited I am and how much I love seeing little snippets of things, but as we get really close and all of a sudden stuff's starting to come out constantly, I'm like, no, I don't want to see anymore. And I have to, because I have to write about it, but I do think, like, even with superhero movies, like, I love superhero movies. We both love superhero movies. But, there's going to be a point where we're like, okay, I'm just going to watch something else now.
I'm finding that with television right now.
Yeah.
I try to watch all the superhero shows on television, and I enjoy watching them, but it sometimes feels like a chore. And I'm sometimes very much aware of the fact that, like, would I really be watching Arrow if it wasn't a licensed property that I already identify with? Like, as a show, I don't think so.
Yeah, because I feel the same way, and Supergirl came out, and I haven't caught up on it yet, and I know that everyone I know loves it, but I'm just like, oh God, I don't. All right, Thanksgiving, I'm gonna watch all of them, because and it's nothing against the show, because I'm so psyched that there's a female superhero show, but there is fatigue, and I mean, I think that can happen if they overdo it with Star Wars. If they really push it too far, people are going to rebel. And, as much as people love it, I think there's definitely going to be a moment after it comes out where people are going to feel like they have to say, oh, no, I didn't like it because. And part of that might be the constant bashing over. I mean, I think I wrote, 20 Star Wars stories last week. So, and I love it, but,
Yeah, in Trouble with Tribbles, Captain Kirk says, too much of anything, even love, is not necessarily a good thing.
I like Tribbles, though. I have one in my closet, and it randomly giggles. No, I'm not hearing things. Like, there's a thing in it where it makes noises, and the battery's dying, so I made myself sound completely crazy.
Again.
This is not new. But, in terms of bringing back, like, TV shows and stuff like that, obviously we're excited for X-Files, Twin Peaks, which they've pushed.
I do wonder if there's a danger there, though, because you start to remind people that nothing ends. Mm-hmm. And when that gets to be the case, it's harder to care. There was a line in Avengers, that Age of Ultron, where Vision says nothing is beautiful because it lasts.
Yeah.
And that's true. I mean, the idea that things go away is, in part, what gives them value. And if everything you love is always available and always coming in new forms and new formats, it can get old, and you can sort of feel like you have to move on.
Yeah, that's true. I still love Star Wars. Star Wars. I'm not going to sing the song. Anyway, tell us what franchises you don't want to see messed with, what your favorite franchises are, which ones have they messed up?
I'm kind of curious, too, just to hear, is there a franchise that anybody loved that they stopped loving just because it lasted too long?
Oh, I bet there's a lot of those. Leave them in the comments. Make sure to follow us right here, Most Craved on Twitter, and we will see you next week.